Marlene, thank you so much for your time. Beautiful offices, by the way. And we were touching on your marketing is excellent if I look at the branding and all the rest. But that's not the norm, by the way, for most of these agri organizations. Am I right? So why the sexiness?
I think SAPPO has a legacy of sexiness. We stand on the shoulder of giants. I think the leadership that came before me did a great job in terms of branding and positioning pork as a category. We also spend quite a substantial share of our statutory levy on consumer education, the marketing of the category, and making sure that we are appealing to our members and the broader public.
Well, and we'll expand on that because I mean it's interesting because again, and I'm stating the obvious. We mentioned earlier when we were having a chat that there's a lot of similarities with the dairy industry, where you have the farmer and you have the consumer.
Yes.
And I mean, and the consumer at the end of the day, that's a big driving factor. And I'm stating the obvious. So it'd be interesting to hear more about that. So can you give us a snapshot? What's been good? What's been challenging in 2025? And then looking ahead to 2026, what are you concerned about, and what most important, what are you excited about?
Yeah, Jock, I think if we look take a longer perspective before 2025, the pork industry faced quite a bit of challenges. I think if you go as far back as 2018, we had the African swine fever issues, and then right into COVID, and after that, the extremely high grain prices. So it was really a challenging 5 years for the pig industry. And in 2025, I think we've seen grain prices coming down. The carcass prices for pork has increased due to the broader increase in meat prices associated with FMD. So pig farmers can start breathing a little again, and we're very thankful for that. And I think that creates a lot of scope for 2026 in doing some exciting things that we've been thinking about, but not necessarily put into practice because margins were under pressure. So when we engage with our members, we're hearing about expansion and intensification and all sorts of new endeavors. That's really exciting. And I think if you take a value chain perspective, we're also seeing that primary guys are increasingly integrating. So we're seeing a lot of new initiatives and innovation up to the retail point. Online stores, new product development, and I think that's a testament to how innovative the industry is, but also how relieved we are with some of the constraints that we faced being lifted.
So I want to touch on a few things, and immediately from a retail, I think one of the success stories is just the Escort brand, right? We see everywhere in the nice shops popping up and all the rest, which is, I think, in itself a fantastic case study of how you should be doing it. But as far as, again, you mentioned earlier that there's a comparison with the chicken industry. We talked about dairy farms. So what drives costs for a pig farmer? You know, just unpack it for a novice. What does this business model look like? You mentioned grain. So what does a pig eat? You know, so just unpack it.
So 2/3 of our production cost is associated with feed. So that's underpinned by grain prices, maize and soybeans more specifically. So you can think back to 2024, the El Nino conditions. I think we touched on 6,000 Rand a ton for maize. That was extremely stressful times for any intensive livestock industry.
So the farmers were happy. The grain
farmers
were very happy.
Farmers. But if you had an animal to feed, that was a different perspective. That's the bulk of our costs, and obviously what we keep a keen eye on in terms of what margins will do in terms of the future projections.
And what is that in terms of animal feed? And again, it's interesting with the dairy farmer. It's just over 60% is feed. So again, a similarity. What are those options there as far as feeding a pig? I mean, do you have other alternatives?
No, not really. I think the way that the pig industry dealt with extremely high input costs over the last couple of years is really improving productivity. So On two fronts, we saw huge gains over the last couple of years. The first is the slaughter weight of the animals coming to market, and then also the amount of piglets born per sow. So those two metrics really increased over the last couple of years, and that allowed pig producers to remain sustainable. I think
so again, very like similar to precision farming. It's just a matter of measuring this asset, making sure
100%,
you're getting the max out of it.
Making sure that you get the maximum in terms of productivity. So that kept a lot of producers afloat, and I think it's also something that the industry can be very proud of. The productivity gains over the last 5 years have been massive.
So let's unpack that a bit. What's happened? What was brought to the table? I'm assuming the measurability component. What does that look like? How did they increase that productivity and the increase of the birth rate?
So I think it's management practices on the one end, like you've alluded to, but then also huge gains in genetics. So in South Africa, there's 3 genetic companies that basically dominate the market or are key role players in the market, and they are linked to their international counterparts. So we're fortunate in the sense that we are on par with the best genetics that's available internationally. We've been engaging with some of these genetics providers, and they told us, it was a week or 2 ago, that every 7 weeks there's a batch of semen coming in that they use to inseminate the local breeding sows. And I mean, that allows you to be in tune with all the progression that's happening internationally.
So every 7 weeks you've got an updated semen.
Yeah, so you're linked to the genetic pool internationally that's managed in such a way that we're literally driving productivity gains week by week.
Is that unique?
Good question. I don't know the other intensive industries, how their genetics are measured and how they're tuned into the global context, but for pigs that's definitely a big driver of how we remain sustainable.
So bringing so the cost as far as the maize is concerned, and that input, you can't affect that, but so the sow is going to eat what she eats. It's a matter of what the birth rate is. Is that the big productivity driver?
100%.
Is that as simple as that?
So you want to maximize the kilograms produced per sow in order to spread the feed cost across
just as simple as that, just divided by more piglets.
Yeah.
What does the supply chain look like? You mentioned now there's a retail component, there's again our abattoir. So what does that look like?
So it varies. We have integrated value chains where you'll have a producer component that's all the way integrated up to retail level. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you'll have...
Like Escort.
Yeah. On the other end of the spectrum, you'll have a sow unit that produces weaners. So after the piglets have been weaned, they move on to another site and then they're reared and grown.
Like similarity with chickens.
Yeah. So it varies from all the fully integrated to arm's length from weaner stage. And I think it also speaks to the different markets that they are servicing. So typically those integrated chains would be the brands that we all know, that we see on the retail shelves. But then towards your more informal market, there's more space for a separated sow and grower unit. So yeah, I think across the board.
Yeah, and legislation doesn't limit you. Can I be a pig farmer, slaughter and have my own retail store?
Yes, legislation doesn't limit you. I think the limiting factor on entering the pig industry is capital. It's very capital intensive. And then...
From a technology standpoint?
Yes. And then whether or not you integrate is your choice of business model. And I think an integrated company allows you flexibility of where you capture your margins. So typically when there was constraining times, The processors could capture a larger share, and if you were integrated, you could share in some of those gains. And I think that is typically what drove a lot of primary producers to extend into the rest of the value chain.
So I want to touch on, obviously, because there's a good old supply and demand, so we're going to get to the consumer, shortly, because that would be interesting also as far as what's driven demand and what does that look like, and again, the products. But just standing still here, so we want to talk about animal health and the impact on import, exports, and again, the impact on price. So we've got foot and mouth, obviously a big thing at the moment. So what's happening on the pig side is that at the pig flu back in the day. I'm assuming that also has an impact on the consumer's perception.
Yeah.
But how just unpack that for us.
So I think if we start off with FMD, we haven't had any clinical cases of FMD in pigs in South Africa over the last year, or since we've had this increase in cases amongst cattle production units. And I think the first important thing to highlight there is biosecurity is really non-negotiable in pig production, and it's any pig producer's insurance policy. So the learnings from African swine fever in 2018 and a few cases later on is really that the only thing that you have that you can control, or that's in your ambit, is how you manage your biosecurity. So that is top notch in the pig industry. It's literally a code that we live by.
Has that always been like that?
It has definitely improved since the ASF outbreaks.
I see. So it was a sense of urgency.
It was a key to survival.
Yeah.
And so, to a large extent, I think that is also what has protected the pig herd from FMD. So we are affected in the sense that although no animals have contracted it yet, if you fall into an area that's a disease management area, it makes it difficult to move your animals. And so that presents challenges because pigs are an intensive industry. If you can't move your animals, you eventually get to a welfare problem because the pigs get too big for your infrastructure. So it's really a case of when those animals are slaughter ready, you need to be able to move them to the abattoir. And in a disease management area, that becomes problematic. I think we've had a few of these cases over the year since the spread of FMD, and we've managed to navigate that quite successfully with the support from state vets and various stakeholders. And so essentially, how we've been impacted by FMD is actually that we've seen beef prices increasing quite substantially. And that has also created some space for pork prices to increase. So from a consumer perspective, we are definitely an alternative, a versatile alternative to consumers that would have traditionally maybe thought about beef.
Yes.
So pork is definitely now an option. From a trade perspective, we trade pork mostly regionally. And so again, there we manage the trade process through what we call a compartment. So a compartment, or the compartment system, is managed by the Department of Agriculture, and that is where they certify a disease-free area or a disease-free production unit.
So effectively the geofencing of
geofencing. So in the case of pig production, that's relatively easy because it's an intensive, self-contained unit.
Yes. It's literally under a roof.
Yes.
So it makes it less.
Or in a fence, actually.
Yes,
that's part of your biosecurity
they're not
protocol.
grazing and strolling around. Yes.
And so through the compartment system, we manage to trade mostly regionally, but there are selected deep sea trading partners as well. Definitely something that we want to expand into the future, but I think that's part of the broader animal health context that needs to be managed in South Africa. So it's not just a pork agenda item, but something that we need to manage collectively with our counterparts in cattle and sheep as well.
So, and I'm glad you touched on that, because I just made a note here saying meat. Do you meet to discuss meat? But that's so what do you guys compare notes?
Yeah, I think there are issues that's overarching where we need to compare notes if we want to or not. So, I mean, issues like animal health is overarching, and essentially what's decided within the beef context will affect the pork context and vice versa. So there's selected forums where we discuss these overarching issues. But then there's also nuances associated with every industry. So I think within pork, for instance, our marketing focus has always been very strong because pork isn't on the level of consumption that, for instance, beef would be in South Africa. And we see a huge scope for it to increase if you compare us to Europe or China, where the per capita consumption is multiples of what we're seeing in South Africa. So there we've actively made the decision to go at it from an industry-specific standpoint because we see that there's so much room to grow.
So let's unpack that. Let's focus on the consumer, because I think ultimately that's fascinating. I mean, it sounds like, just summarize in my mind, you guys of highly tech-driven. So it sounds from that standpoint. Sounds similar to again to the chicken guy. You know, that you've got things under control as far as that's concerned. From there, it's price, consumer. So what are you seeing out there? What are the misconceptions about pork? I'm thinking of Europe, for example, and I guess the same with China, very cultural driven. It's always been there. We meat driven, so I think that also has an impact. But what are the misconceptions about pork? And again, what are those opportunities? And again, what type of pork products out there? And we mentioned bacon, everybody's favorite. But what do you see then, again, that product development opportunities?
Yeah. So I think first off, it's an issue of balancing the carcass, right? So it would have been lovely if the whole carcass could have been bacon, because we have no trouble in selling bacon. But there's other parts of the carcass that also needs to find a place in the market. And we obviously need to optimize, and we need to unlock the value associated with each of those products or cuts. So we do a lot of initiatives on fresh fresh pork products. So not necessarily processed like ham or bacon, but how do you use a loin chop or a pork shoulder? And SAPPO specifically spends time on recipe development, a lot of time on digital and social marketing to make sure that pork is front of mind. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of months is that the relative pricing within the meat complex have provided us with an opportunity to position certain pork cuts and to drive a story around it. So what beef has done brilliantly is you don't go to a butchery to buy beef. You go to a butchery to buy a steak or and we're veering 100%. So we're veering in that direction with pork, so that you think, oh, I want a braai tonight. I'm going to the butchery to buy a pork neck or a ribeye, a pork ribeye, as I often call it. So a lot of exciting work in terms of giving the cuts personality, and I think we're very proud of that. Having said that, there are a lot of misconceptions associated with pork. So first off, I think people don't realize what the pork production process entails, how scientific and clean and measurable it is.
Is that part of the problem? That if I think, again, historically, I grew up as like you just throw anything in a... Is that part of the misconception?
It is definitely part of the misconception.
A pig eats anything and I feed him anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I think we often drive around and then see pigs next to the road, and then if you're not immersed in the industry, that's your frame of reference. Oh, it's wandering pig.
It's a little vulture. It's a four-legged vulture.
100%, but that is commercial pig production is far removed from that. It's very clean, very calculated. Even the feed that gets used in the production process is audited in terms of the feed mill that it comes from, the amount of antimicrobials that's included there. So I think nothing's left to chance in the production process. And then I think there's a few cultural myths that we need to deal with. So just before I joined SAPPO, my ex-colleague said to me, Marlene, we want to support you, but pork gives us tonsillitis, which I think we have a huge journey to travel in terms of debunking some of those
just this urban
legends.
Urban legends.
100%. Yeah. That is why we're excited. I think we've done a lot of work in terms of scientifically contextualizing these pork facts. Another thing that we often get is now pork is too fatty, but if you consider the nature of a pork chop, for instance, all the fat sits outside. So if you are concerned with eating lean protein, eating that chop is perfect. Just don't eat the fatty and the rind. We are very excited, and we're doing a lot of work to position that correctly.
Yeah.
And I think we've started to see the dividends from our marketing initiatives.
What is the? There's so many questions for you. But let's quickly stand still in nutrition. Because you mentioned low fat. How does it compare nutrition-wise? A piece of pork versus chicken versus.
That's an extremely difficult question, and you must remember that you're posing it to an economist. Look, I think it is high quality protein, but I mean, from a broader perspective, we're not in the business of saying any meat protein is better than the other. I think everyone, chicken, beef, mutton.
Just eat more meat.
Yeah.
Eat more meat.
Be a consumer of meat. It's good for you. It's good for the brain. It facilitates development in kids. So we're advocates of animal protein, and it's not a competition. We are obviously saying pork is delicious and value for money and all those wonderful things.
The other white meat, if I think back in the day, right? I
think we're now more closely aligned to the red meat category.
The other meat.
but when you eat meat, I think anyone in the livestock sector will be happy.
Going back to traceability, where does the meat come from? I think we're moving towards that. It's almost know the farmer, right? Scan the QR code. It's old news, but I think it's early days for the South African market. Scanning and being able to trace it, and again, for that peace of mind, to know that this is not a pig that was walking along the highway. What are you guys looking at there? What's happening there as far as knowing the farmer from a consumer standpoint?
So there was great work done in the pork industry as early as 2013, where a consumer assurance scheme was developed. It's called Pork 360, where various aspects of pork production, or the best practice in pork production, is audited by vets once a quarter. So it ranges from biosecurity to animal welfare. So these different components are overseen quarterly by a vet, and then in a formal auditing scheme, and then when that batch of pigs leave the farm, they can actually be assured as produced through a Pork 360 system. As part of that system, we have extended it to the abattoir. you now have to log movement. So we can even see when the pigs leave the farm to the abattoir, the producer logs the movements on a movement app, and when the abattoir receives the batch of pigs, they log it as they've accepted the batch and it's ready for slaughter. So the pigs have come quite a long way in terms of traceability, making sure that the production claims that we stand for is actually assured by or underpinned by a formal auditing scheme. And so I think we've done a lot of great work in terms of assuring and providing that traceability system. Where we can do more work is to socialize the different value chain stakeholders around what does it mean to be Pork 360. Why is it beneficial for someone to buy from a producer that is Pork 360 or from an abattoir that's Pork 360? And it ultimately boils down to meat quality. So Pork 360 is not a consumer-facing claim that we would like to push. We rather want to socialize the value chain around Pork 360 claims.
So purely business to business.
Business to business. So that they know when they're buying Pork 360 pork, it is quality pork, and they'll probably secure a returning consumer if they have quality pork on their shelves.
Got it. And that in itself, it's a peace of mind and quality control, but it's creating a brand around that stamp of approval.
100%.
In essence. Theft is that a challenge in the fact that it's almost a protected environment? Is it less of a problem?
Less of an issue than in extensive livestock industries.
Is it a factor though?
I don't think if you ask a producer, it would be in the top 5 things that he would be concerned about.
I guess that's also what makes life a lot easier when it comes to traceability, geofencing and all the rest.
100%.
Which is very interesting. I want to touch on culture-wise. We mentioned earlier Europe being, pork consumers love it. What drove that? Was that the cheap meat back in the day, and that's just part of the institution today? Is that as simple as that, or was there deliberate consumer marketing component?
That's a good question, and maybe something for us to go and retract and learn from. I suppose. Well, I don't know. I think culturally, it's just always has been part of the diet in a European context, and so we maybe don't have that advantage. We have a way to go in terms of getting it as an established part of the diet, but I think we've come a long way. We've seen huge gains in terms of consumers buying pork. And I think that's probably the symptom of affordability. And then once you've started to consume it on a regular basis because of affordability, you get accustomed to it, you get socialized with the recipes and the different cuts, and then you are keen to buy it more frequently.
Look, and it is delicious. It's not that it's got a weird taste or look or something. I think it's more of a I guess, again, it's cultural. We eat meat, right?
And
or red meat,
it's
historically.
It's versatile, right? If you think of all the different pork products that you get, and if you consider any pork recipe book, what are the different options that you can make, it's actually quite astounding.
A bit of a no-brainer. What's happening from, again, looking forward, emerging farmers, or like I said, small farmers and all the rest, what's happening around there? What are the opportunities there? I think, and again, if we look at great meat industry, obviously, again, foot and mouth disease is put a huge spotlight on it. But at the same time, again, incredible opportunities to export, create jobs locally, etc., etc. Do you guys have similar opportunities from that standpoint?
100% we do. I think if you consider emerging farmers specifically, I've mentioned that pig farming is extremely capital intensive. So what we are thinking about is how do you graduate an emerging farmer or someone that's operating but not necessarily at the scale of a commercial farmer? How do you grow him organically up to a point where they are at a point where they are commercially viable in terms of size and integration into the market. And there's some definite challenges to that. So I think for the interim, we've come to the conclusion that there's space for both sizes, and that we need to embrace this dualistic nature of the industry. So there are smaller farmers that doesn't necessarily have the productivity levels of your commercial farmers, that face challenges like they're paying more because they're buying smaller batches of feed, etc., etc. But they also have a more direct access to market in terms of a more informal market space. And in that informal market space, there's a definite place for that, and there is sufficient margins for these guys to remain in business, or to even to thrive. So we are still working on how do we move someone from emerging to emerged. I think in a capital intensive industry that's never clear. But at this point we're supporting across the board. We're supporting our commercial farmers, but we have a team of 8 business development managers that serve like extension officers within the pork industry to focus on generating those productivity gains for emerging farmers, and to make sure that things like biosecurity are comparable to what we would see in a commercial equivalent. So we are really focusing on getting those metrics as comparable as it can be to what's happening in a commercial space.
Sure, it's fascinating. So 8 people dedicated to these emerging farmers, from almost like free consultants in many ways.
100%.
Wow, that's very interesting, very, very forward thinking. So what is an emerging farmer? What is a big farmer? What are the numbers? What in terms of units? Can you put a rand value to it?
So look, it's a moving target. And as we discussed this before the interview started, but as with any industry, and it's not just South Africa, there is consolidation, and the amount of farmers gets smaller, and the unit sizes of the production units gets bigger. So if you asked me 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said 200 sows could be commercially viable.
But again, very similar to cattle.
Very similar
150,
to cattle.
200.
We're probably approaching 400. Maybe we've got a bit of a reprieve with the current market conditions, but there is definitely a trend that you need more and more to
So 400 is that's if you want to be serious about this business.
Yes.
How many 400s are there?
No, quite a few.
And as far as the small guys are concerned, so what is the small emerging? How many do they have?
Well, our business development managers, the support that they give range from anything to a 5 sow unit to a 150 sow unit.
Wow.
So it varies, and I think the nature of smaller scale pig production is also that at one point you might have 150 sows, and then when you have pressing market conditions like we've had, you typically would not have, your margins would force consolidation. So that would shrink, and then it would expand again when the market conditions permits. So I think as opposed to your commercial units, that's relative, it's a constant size. These smaller guys are typically in flux. So based on the market conditions, they would grow and expand, or contract and expand.
Which is not a bad thing necessarily.
No, I think it does give you some flexibility.
Yeah. So how many members do you have?
So the statutory levy stipulates that anyone that slaughters a pig pays a statutory levy. And if you pay a statutory levy, you are a member of the producer organisation. But we have 180 odd active producers that's on our our digital platform, which we call the World of Pork. I think we are making a concerted effort to anyone that slaughters a pig but that's not inclined to engage with SAPPO, to get around to them, to hear what the issues are, to understand how we can support them, to become an active member. I think there's great value in producer organizations, and it will be increasingly so into the future, given the high levels of uncertainty with disease and feed prices that we are experiencing.
And just lobbying in general,
100%.
in terms of legislation, all the rest, which...
And so we want to make sure that we are close to our members and we keep everyone that is a stakeholder as close as possible to get to optimal outcomes.
But I mean, the fact that 180 farmers, it's incredible in what you achieve. I mean, the fact that you say that from a value standpoint, cattle is 4 or 5 times bigger. I mean, but there's, 26,000 cattle farmers. So it's incredible thing. You guys are punching above your waist. So it's well done. It's very impressive. I just want to ask you a last question before we, as far as, technology. What's driving as far as day-to-day running and managing of the farm? What's the big driving factor? And again, where's best in class? Do you guys steal with your eyes? Do you borrow? What's happening at the European level? Again, what's happening on that side of things? So
I think where the biggest advancement in technology sits within the pork sector is in terms of genetics, and we've touched on now why it's working as well as it is. We're integrated into a world market. I think in terms of actual production processes, I suppose there we do borrow from other jurisdictions, but you also have to keep in mind that South Africa is very specific. We don't have the same production conditions as, say, in Europe, or the same feed compositions or rations. So we are very specific, and I think again the spirit in the industry, or the culture in the industry, is everything is calculated, everything is measured. So even when something is trialed or tried, it's done meticulously to understand what the benefits of that progression could be before you simply dive into it. And so any production method is tried and tested, and I think it's done in according to what our production realities in South Africa are.
And does that mean you're working very closely with some of the bigger farmers then, to enable you to see exactly what works and what doesn't before you roll it out? Or
yes, I mean, we don't roll out production methods as such. Our role is to create an enabling environment, and so where we facilitate our producers is to engage with government to make sure that the trading environment is as functional as it should be, to engage with various stakeholders on how we manage disease. I think when we get into the nuts and bolts of production, it's actually the farmers that's the guys that excel at it, and we leave them to do what they do best.
Do they get around a table and compare notes?
No, I don't know. I don't know. So I do think, like most industries, there's some benchmarking exercises within the industry. So some of them do participate in these benchmarking initiatives. But I think what's challenging in terms of the pork sector, so you would typically see in grains or in some of the fruits that they have these working groups or workshops where producers get together and share notes. But just to highlight how important biosecurity is, it's typically not a practice.
They won't do it because that's a risk.
They encourage in the pork sector because it presents a risk. If you sit around a table with someone else, it's one more risk node that you need to manage from a disease exposure perspective.
Very interesting. So a lot of isolation in a way.
Yeah. So,
but again, at least we have computers and internet.
Yeah, and we do still find selected study groups.
Yeah.
But it's typically not as prevalent in pork as you would
or
see it
as
in
frequent compared to grain or where
compared to some of the
monthly
other
or quarterly
industries.
where they get together.
100%.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Marlene, thank you so much. I must admit, I'm very surprised. It's a fascinating world. It's a fascinating world. But again, I want to congratulate you guys that it's not a lot of farmers, but as I said, you have huge impact, and I wish you the very best for 2026. I hope you can shoot out the lights, right?
100%. Thank you. We are looking forward to 2026, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for your time.